So we just learned how to create the XML. Now let's talk about how we can create JSON. We know that we can create a JSON without having to any annotation on our domain classes. Okay? So as I said, in order to have a JSON entity provider to work, you have to actually include either JAXBElement or Moxie. These are two popular implementations for marshalling and unmarshalling JSON representation to and from Java object. So as I mentioned before yesterday, if you take a look at the pom.xml file, we have to include this JAXBElement, library into our project. Otherwise, it's not going to work. XML is actually kind of built in, so you don't have to actually include it. But for JSON, you have to actually manually include this dependency, meaning this library, in your application. As I said, for JSON, domain class does not need to be annotated with anything. Okay, so far we have learned how to create XML and JSON using built-in content handler or entity provider. Those are the same things. Now let's take a look at the option number 2, in which we are going to create a response using ResponseBuilder class manually ourselves. So the reason you want to create your own response using ResponseBuilder is because sometimes you want to have a fine-grained control in terms of creating a response. For example, these are the things that you might want to do when you're creating response object. For example, you want to set the content type field with the media type you want. Sometimes you want to set the location response field. Sometimes you want to set cache control field and tag and last modify. So these are all caching related fields, and we're going to actually talk about these things in detail in caching presentation this afternoon. And you can actually add your own custom headers to the response as well, and you can add cookies to the response. So these are examples of fine-grained control on creating a response. So how to create and build a response manually? As I said, you are going to use ResponseBuilder class, which is actually inside inline class of response class. So the steps for creating your own response is that you are going to create a ResponseBuilder object from response class. Then you're going to populate the response using ResponseBuilder method, and then finally you're going to call build method of ResponseBuilder, which returns the response object. So this is all based on what is called the builder design pattern. Okay, so step number 1 is to create ResponseBuilder object from response class. So response class is an abstract class, but it contains a bunch of static method which you can use to create ResponseBuilder object. So here, status method, you can specify particular HTTP response status, and then you can get the ResponseBuilder object. OK is the setting HTTP response status to 200. Okay, and this is the I think I should actually say OK, not OD. Okay, when you're calling OK method, you can specify the entity. What that means is that the entity is going to be set, meaning it will have the response body will contain this entity in the form of a media type you specify, or media type that you're going to actually set later on. Or you can specify the media type as a second argument when you call OK method. In this case, media type is actually being fed into OK method, but you can set this media type later on using type method. Okay, and we're going to see that in the following slide. Created method is actually for the setting location field with newly created items URI. Okay, so created is used when you want to return 201 response. 201 is actually successful creation, and you also want to set the location response field with a URI location. Okay, so and in fact there are a bunch of other methods. These are all overloaded. Some of them are overloaded method, taking different number of arguments, and so these are the methods you can actually use. Once you got the okay, so this is an example. So if I want to actually create a response builder object with a status of status not found, this is 4 and this is the method you can use. And this is for creating a response builder object with a response status set to 200. Here response okay customer. So this is example, the third example, where you are going to actually set the customer object to be included in the body, response body. And here you are doing the same thing, but here you're setting the XML as a content type of the response, the header. And content type response header, and here this is the you are going to here you are setting the response status to 2 or 1, and you also set the location field with this constructed URI. So once you got the response builder object, then you can actually use the builder pattern, meaning you can actually call a bunch of methods to set things up, to further things up, to further the control, the creation of a response. So here, this is a response builder class. It contains a bunch of methods. For example, if you want to actually set the response body with a particular entity, then you can actually call entity method. Okay, so here, if you use the OK customer or OK customer and media type application XML, basically here you are calling, this is the same thing as calling OK method and then entity method with customer object. Okay, you can call type method to set the media type. So combination of calling entity method and type method and setting the OK is this example. So here you are basically setting the response to 200, and then you also you're basically calling, in a sense, the entity method with the customer object, and also calling a type method with this media type. Okay, and the language, you can actually set the locale language, and this is a location. So here in this case, I think you can actually create the without actually specifying the constructed URI, right? And then you can actually call the location method to set the URI. Okay, all right. And the tag and the last modified and cache control, these are all caching related method, and we're going to actually talk about these 3 methods in detail later on. Here, header method, this method is used to include a custom header. Okay, and this is actually creating a cookie. All right, so this is an example of adding last modified and my header response header. So I created so I call OK method with the customer object, which means is setting the response status to 200, and response body will be filled with the customer object. And then once I got the response builder object, I can actually call these methods. So I call last modified with a new date, meaning last modified response header will be set with this date. And here I'm actually creating my own custom header called my header and Sang Shin. Okay, and so in step 2, you're basically building up the headers. Okay, and finally, step 3, you are going to call build method of response builder. So this is the last method that you're going to call. It will return response object. Okay, and this response object that you can actually return. Okay, so that is how you can create response using a response builder class. Okay, so let's see exercise 3. Alright, so we're going to actually run response builder application, response builder. So this one, if I click run as and run on server. And the UI is again pretty much the same with the previous exercises. So we are going to access the user XML, and it returns XML, and again I can call JSON and returns JSON. Okay. All right, now if you take a look at the code, so this is how we created response. Okay, so I have get XML via response method, which returns response object rather than user object, as we have seen in previous exercises. And this is how we're going to actually create a response. First of all, we can actually call OK and method, which is setting the 200. OK, and then I call entity method with a user object, and then I can call type method to set things up, and I'm actually calling last modified, and then I'm setting my custom header with the JPassion.com and build. Same thing for the JSON. Okay, so if you actually run this code, you should be able to actually see my custom header. And so let's actually see. I'm gonna just open developer tool, and if I click user XML, and then I should be able to see, so here I should be able to see my custom response header. So these are custom response header, and you can see my custom header and jpassion.com, right? And so here you can certainly actually okay, so you can certainly the response here, you can certainly change this code so that instead of actually calling entity, I can actually provide user object right here. Okay, and then I don't need this entity, or I can even actually specify as a second argument of this media type. So I can actually have this guy here and the second argument. All right, and I can comment this guy out, and it should work exactly the same. Okay, so let's save the change and wait until this guy is rebuilt and reloaded. Okay, so it's reloaded, and then I should be able to again go back here, and it should work exactly the same. Okay, and so you can actually try to optimize like that. And let's see. Okay, so that is exercise 3. And for your own exercise, in the student resource class that you have created above, add a method in which a response is created. Yeah, so you can actually modify the your student resource class. Now try to use ResponseBuilder class rather than using built-in entity provider. Okay, and you can certainly take a look at the ResponseBuilder class and see what other method it has. So let's take a look at the ResponseBuilder. Where is the response? Okay, so I could actually receive these things as ResponseBuilder. So I'm gonna actually go here. If I take a look at the Java documentation, and it should actually return ResponseBuilder class. So you can go to the ResponseBuilder class, and you can see a bunch of method. So you can see the last modified. Yeah, so try to actually set the language and see whether that works. Setting the language as one of the methods you can actually being invoked here. So these are all builder patterns. So you can see they are all returning. They are all returning ResponseBuilder objects. So that's the reason you can actually chain things up. Okay. You can certainly actually use the location method. So try one of these methods that is not introduced in the lab and see whether that works as expected. Okay. So that is your exercise. All right. So I'll give you guys about 10 minutes to try exercise 3.